Well, the best way to campaign is with our actions. We need to walk the walk.
We're clearly not in a position where we're going to run the government, but we can stop the government, Liberal, National Party or Labor, from doing stupid things.
No, I think a lot of people are now deciding to take action into their own hands.
Welcome to the Aussie Wire News. Our first story today is the Reserve Bank Governor Michele Bullock saying that we should be charged a fee for using cash. Or did she say that? I speak with Monica Smit to get an update on her Keep Cash Alive campaign and to understand whether the war on cash is coming from the Reserve Bank or perhaps from elsewhere. Then we'll speak with Senator Malcom Roberts to understand the legacy left behind by outgoing Queensland Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk. And finally, I'll be joined in studio by my colleague Anna McGovern, where we'll try and get to the bottom of what's going on with Boris Johnson and the UK inquiry into COVID, as well as some other rather more encouraging events happening worldwide. All that and more is coming at you right now on the Aussie Wire News. Well, it's been blowing up all over social media and all over some media channels as well that the Reserve Bank Governor Michele Bullock has said that stores should start charging customers for using cash. Well, that's not quite what she said, but it's still an important point, and I brought on someone who's been campaigning for the use of cash and the protection of cash and in fact keeping cash alive since before it was cool, before a lot of other people jumped on that bandwagon, and that is none other than Monica Smit. Monica, welcome to the Aussie Wire.
Thank you for inviting me to talk about this topic.
Well, this has absolutely blown up, and I'm really happy that it has, even though I think there's some really inaccuracies in the way that it's been reported. It has put cash and the use of cash right back on the agenda for a lot of people that really may not have been thinking about it. You've no doubt seen the headline, as a lot of people would have, the claim here from ABC News that the RBA Governor asks if Australians should pay a fee to use cash. What's your initial reaction to that kind of a concept, that idea?
It just solidifies exactly why we are using cash, which is to keep money away from the banks and back into the local community. And it's never going to fly, obviously. You could never charge a fee for processing cash. It's not going to work. So it's quite hilarious, really.
Well, to be fair, the Reserve Bank Governor, Michele Bullock, does actually acknowledge the fact that there'd be a huge amount of resistance, a huge amount of pushback. And Monica, of course, you'd be leading the charge on that pushback if they ever were to try such a thing. The logistics of it don't even bear thinking about. But there are some comments that she's made, and I'm going to play a 2-minute clip from what is actually a 40-minute speech and then interview that she did. I've read the entire transcript, and I think a lot of reports are being a little bit unfair on her. There are some concerns here, but I want to play an unedited, continuous 2-minute clip from the Q&A.
Okay, here's a question we might tackle in the big debate as well. It's an interesting one. Do we need to start reflecting on the true cost of processing cash for businesses and therefore not present it as a fee-free option for customers, while always charging customers when they use their credit card when, there's no other option really?
Yeah. So look, it is a good question, and the issue with cash has always been that businesses don't really understand, I think, the costs of cash in their business. They are at the moment, I think understanding it a bit more, but in the past they haven't really. They've called shrinkage as their main cost, which basically means theft, but really they haven't really internalised, if you like, the costs of processing. I think the challenge with cash is that it really does have a big community, public service sort of aura attached to it. If you try to charge people to use cash, they're prepared to pay to get it out of an ATM, but if businesses started charging people to use cash, I suspect there would be a very big backlash. Having said that, it's also true that as economists, you want people to face the prices of using particular services that reflect the cost of those services. So at the moment, I think we're probably in a position where it's very difficult to actually enforce payment for cash, but it's going to end up what's going to happen, and what does happen at the moment, is that the costs end up embedded in the costs of the financial institutions that are providing the services, and people don't face them. I think it'd be a very big challenge, though, to get people to face the costs of cash.
There is so much there, so much to unpack. Now that I'm sure you've read it already, but hearing again in clarity and precisely what was actually said, unedited, like I said, what's your response to her comments there?
Oh, boo-hoo, the banks are going to have trouble doing their job. Like, their only job is to manage our money, and they make billions of dollars doing it. And if they have to absorb the cost, I'm not really sad about that.
That is the cost of their business. It's literally the business they're in. There's so many things to unpack in that. She starts out by saying that she doesn't think that businesses really understand the cost of cash. Well, she's never run a business, so she wouldn't know. She graduated from university, went and got a job at the RBA. She's been working at the RBA ever since. I would suggest that she's probably not in a position to really comment on what business owners do and don't know. She talked about the internalising of the costs of cash. Now, what's interesting about this is they also internalise the cost of, for example, their employees, the electricity that they use, the rent that they pay on their premises. I mean, this is what's known as overheads. These are the costs of operating a business. She's using this euphemism, internalised costs. It's overhead. That's what that is. Every business has it and every business runs with it. What I find particularly interesting, though, is there's this continued suggestion that the use of cash is more expensive than cards. But that doesn't make any economic sense, because if that were true, then businesses would actually want you to use card and would actually be saying they would, instead of charging a fee for using card, that absorb the fee themselves because it'd be saving them money. What she's saying literally flies in the face of what we can see as we look at every single business around us. How out of touch must she be?
Yeah, well, the fact that she has had no other job makes no sense. Now, I'm going to play devil's advocate, and I think what she means is that obviously a staff member has to take that cash to the bank, which takes up time and effort. And then if you are accepting cash, you need to have change, which sometimes means you have to go out of your way to get coins and things like that. Mm-hmm. So if it's potentially half an hour a day to manage cash within your business, but it saves you thousands of transaction fees. So I think that's the point that they're making, but I don't think it's relevant either.
But again, people are rational and business owners are always thinking about how to save a buck. If it was really genuinely true that they were better off when you used a card, then they'd be encouraging us to do exactly that. Now, to be fair, some businesses have gone cashless. They have gone card only. I vote with my feet when I come across those businesses and simply don't use their services. So maybe there's an argument to be made that some businesses are recognising the value of that. But to suggest that this is just across the board, cash is costing businesses a fortune and they don't realise it, I think is an incredibly naive thing. I want to get to another comment that she made around the shrinkage. Now, shrinkage is a euphemism for theft, as she rightly pointed out in her comment. There's shrinkage being a cost for any retail business. Theft, things disappearing from their shelves, is a cost for any business. But I can't help but reflect on the fact that the RBA is responsible for the shrinkage in the value of our dollars. Now, if shrinkage is theft, then didn't the head of the RBA just acknowledge that inflation is theft?
I think that's a really good observation, Topher. Yes.
I can't see any other conclusion to bring out of this. Now,
we're being stolen from every day, of course, by these organisations and our taxes, and it's just disgusting.
Well, they say that taxation is theft. I disagree. I think taxation is extortion and inflation is theft, because theft happens silently and secretly in the background. Now, just moving on before we go too far down that particular rabbit hole. You've been working for quite some time to encourage people to use more cash. And in the RBA's defence, I interviewed Professor Gigi Foster a little while ago about her interactions with the RBA. And she's actually been assured by the RBA that they are simply watching the numbers. How many people are using cash? How many transactions are being done in cash? What's the value of these transactions? And therefore, how much cash should we be keeping circulating? Michele Bullock, elsewhere in this same speech that we just played a couple of minutes of, does really reinforce the point that cash is important. And it's actually a vital thing to have in the economy. I mean, to her credit, she's literally saying that as part of the same speech. But you're fighting tooth and nail to try and get people to use more cash. Tell us about that campaign and tell us about why you decided that this was a particular fight that you wanted to be in.
Well, the best way to campaign is with our actions. We need to walk the walk. And they're looking at these numbers. You know, in the UK, the use of cash went up for the first time in 10 years. That just came out recently about a week ago, which means they are watching these things. And the reason I'm really passionate about it as well, I've got to give credit to Catherine Austin Fitz. She's an investment banker from USA. Most of your audience would know her. I spent 3 days with her in Holland and she mentored me, and it's changed my life. And she said to me, the reason it's important to use cash is because it's going to make it much harder for them to implement any type of digital ID or digital currency if there's more and more cash in the economy, right? And also what I feel is that every time I pay with cash, I actually imagine that I'm protesting. And it really gives me this sense of empowerment. And especially when I have the perfect change, like the 35 cents, for some reason I get this very satisfying feeling that's probably not normal. And I have this weird look on my face and the cashier's like, what is wrong with this chick? And I'm like, ooh, I've got the 5 cents. Anyway, the point is that it is so important that we empower ourselves with every action that we take. We need to be the example of what we want the rest of the world to do. Now, having cash is freedom. And if that is closed to us, it will be the end of freedom for at least a foreseeable future. And people like you and I, Topher, will not have access to money because of the way that we speak. So it is so important to keep cash alive. But that's from our audience's perspective. From a very basic outside the echo chamber perspective, it's also very easy to talk to people about this topic because it's not a conspiracy to use cash yet, right? And there are some very obvious reasons like saving businesses money on transaction fees and being able to hold cash and things like that. So this is a great way to talk to everyday people. And what I've experienced is I have never met someone who does not agree that we should keep cash alive. And recently, I went up the north coast of Queensland and a lot of areas do not even have reception or FBOS machines and things like that. And they are all for cash. You've got tourists, of course, things like that. And also businesses save money. And this is so important. I just want to tell this really quick story. So we have on www.keepcashalive.com. We have resources. We have things that you can print out as a consumer, and you cut them up into 10 little pieces and you put them inside your wallet. And every time you pay with cash, not if you go to the same place every day because that would be really annoying, but every time you pay with cash, you just give them this little piece of paper and you say, you can read this in your own time. It's very non-invasive and the points are very non-conspiratorial theorist ways. Okay, it's for the normal people. The points on there. I've never had a bad experience. In fact, I've had people hug me and give me discounts and things like that. But also that we have business posters that you can put up if you have a shop front of any sort. And I can tell you a story from a coffee van in Bundaberg. He was having 2/3 of his transactions were FPOS. And as soon as he put that poster up, it went down to 1/3 FPOS transactions. And now when his regular customers come to pay for the coffee, if they don't have cash, they basically apologize to him like he's a teacher or something. And what's really interesting is that he's actually conditioning people to think about where their money goes and who's making profit from their money. So I think this is a really important exercise for all of us, even outside the cash topic, to remember that we have to walk the walk. Now, I will give some allowance. Of course, if you're buying plane tickets, you're going to use your card, okay? Like, I hate it when people have this, like, you know, utopian idea that you can just, like, totally cut off the system. Of course, that's not realistic. So you're your own judge. You be your own judge, okay? And if you've got to go out of your way to get cash because you're making a point, you should do that. If you can't, that's your own problem. You figure it out yourself.
Well, Monica, I love your passion. You're certainly someone who really goes in boots and all. So this is the keepcashalive.com website where people can find those resources. Thank you so much for joining us here and helping us to dissect and understand both the comments by the Reserve Bank Governor Michele Bullock and also your Keep Cash Alive campaign. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, Queensland Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk stepped down last week. It came as, in some sense, as a bit of a shock, but also in the same way that Daniel Andrews' resignation was a shock for some and really not for others. There are plenty of people that saw this coming a very, very long way away. Queensland's not a state that I'm particularly familiar with, so I thought I would bring on a guest who loves his state very, very dearly and, in fact, fights for it every single day, and that is none other than the Federal Senator Malcom Roberts. Thank you so much for making time for us here on the Aussie Wire.
You're most welcome, Topher. I love what you're doing, mate. We've got to get the independent news reports out.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Now, I think it is fair to say that you love Queensland. You're a passionate man when it comes to your state and all of what goes on there and all of what could happen there and the potential that is built into that place. Tell us a little bit about the legacy that Anastasia Palaszczuk leaves behind and the consequences of her time in office.
Well, I think for a start, she's much the same as Dan Andrews. She's loathed at the moment in Queensland, and people are very happy. I got the news at a function on Sunday in the park, and must have been about 20 people there, and I showed people on the phone. Just a cheer went up. People are absolutely delighted she's gone. Her period has been ruled by the Labor machine, which is always the case in Queensland.
Sure.
Her successor will be the same, and luck and not skill. So the Labor machine, not Anastasia Palaszczuk, and luck.
Now,
she was the accidental premier.
The Queensland state government, of course, I'm mindful of the fact, obviously, you're a federal senator for Queensland, but with the Queensland state government, correct me if I'm wrong, is a single house government, meaning that once the government has the majority, there really is no house review and nothing to hold them back. We see the same thing in New Zealand. It's very easy and very fast for the government to go in the wrong direction, but it's potentially, is it not, also very easy and fast for them to go in the right direction? Is there an opportunity here, and do you think that will be seized?
There is an opportunity. It will only happen if a smaller party like One Nation gets balance of power. We're clearly not in a position where we're going to run the government, but we can stop the government, Liberal, National Party or Labor, from doing stupid things by withholding the balance of power. So we can be a brake and we can steer people in the right direction without having absolute power. And that's essential for Queensland. Someone asked me after the previous federal election, 2019, if I thought Queensland was now under threat, because Queensland federally won a lot of the seats in Queensland, almost all. And I said it depends upon the opposition leader at the time, which didn't seem too likely, Deb Frecklington. Look, I'm not inspired by David Crisafulli. I think he would be better than what we've got right now. Stephen Miles is going to be a joke. He's got no credibility. He makes ridiculous statements, puts his foot in it a lot. So it all depends upon the Liberal National Party. And remember, Topher, I called Anastasia Palaszczuk, as many other people did, and the accidental premier. She defeated Campbell Newman, and Campbell Newman was defeated not by the Labor Party machine, but by his own senior politicians who rejected him being parachuted in from externally. I thought Campbell Newman fulfilled his promises. He didn't do anything unexpected, and yet he was crucified because his own, and I've heard this from members of Parliament who were in the Liberal National Party in Campbell Newman's government, and they said it was the Liberal Party's senior members of Parliament that destroyed Campbell Newman.
Yeah, wow.
So it all depends upon the Liberal Nationals, and I've got very much faith on them.
Well, Anastasia Palaszczuk, of course, presided over Queensland during the COVID pandemic, much like Daniel Andrews that you mentioned in the opening here. And this is going to form a very big part of her legacy. Here she is, of course, making a big song and dance along with others, rugby players, etc., about getting the jab. We can't really talk about that era without talking about the legacy that's being left behind from these therapies, these gene therapies, and the rule of law implications of the various mandates that we saw along the way. How do we unscramble this egg?
Well, just remember, Topher, here am I correcting you, which is very, very rare, but they were experimental gene therapy based treatments.
Yes, indeed.
They weren't tested, and the only test that we relied entirely on Pfizer's word for those experimental techniques, and that they relied upon their own tests, which were cut short because of the number of deaths. But what we've seen with Anastasia Palaszczuk is that she refused entry of people from northern New South Wales into the Queensland hospital system. As a result of that, I believe one of the two twins that were refused admission, in the womb, one of those twins died. Other people could not get treatment. The federal government gives Queensland money to look after northern New South Wales' hospital needs.
Sure.
And that was just inhuman. We lost 7,000 nurses, stood down. Many are still out. I've heard some stories. I checked before coming on today. Lost many very, very good people. Many were stood down. They're applying to get jobs back with Queensland Health. And I checked with one very accurate nurse, and she said, as far as she knows, no one has been returned.
Yeah,
and yet the health system is in absolute crisis up here. So we've got 7,000 nurses stood down. We've got thousands of teachers who stood down. And then when they returned to work, they were fined. We've got thousands of police who were stood down. But they never belted the fireys because the firemen firemen and women, they stood up, and they had a very proactive campaign, a very strong reactive campaign as well, legally. But now they're attacking the leaders of that movement. We've got ambulances. Topher, before COVID, we would be weeks before we'd see an ambulance, between seeing ambulances. Now, every time I go out almost, I see an ambulance, and quite often the lights are flashing. They've crashed the health system with bloated, top-heavy bureaucracy. The Queensland government excluded the mayor of Brisbane from the organising committee top meetings with regard to future building of arenas and so on. And the biggest thing of all that the Labor Party did was entrench the power of union bosses. Let me give you a couple of quotes that I dug up.
Sure.
This is just in today's paper. They're talking about Mr. Dick, Cameron Dick, who was one of the contenders for the leadership succession. Mr. Dick and his 18-member right faction have thrown their support behind Mr. Miles after long negotiations between union bosses on Monday.
Yeah.
And another quote from the Australian: Stephen Miles' biggest union backer, Gary Bullock, has been locked in secret backroom deals in a bid to convince rival union leaders to install his hand-picked candidate as Premier. That's Stephen Miles.
Yeah.
So it's a run for the union bosses, mate.
Yeah, I address that directly in my book, Good People Break Bad Laws, talking about the perverse incentives of how politics operates in the major parties in those backroom deals. That's a story for another time. But you spoke a moment ago about the fireys standing up, and of course they're not the only ones who stood up during the lockdowns, etc. There are many different examples. I happen to have some footage here of a truck protest that took place. Of course, they're not the only ones. There were many others as well. What's been the effect on the Queensland people? One of the things that I've noticed about Victorians and New South Welshmen now that I've moved across the border is there are more people politically engaged and paying attention than ever before as a result of what they experienced during lockdowns, etc. Is the same true for Queensland?
Yes, definitely. And I'm just looking at your footage of Brock Holroyd. I had conversations with him for many, many months afterwards. He did a top job. He was hounded by the police all over the country. His truck was registration plates were taken. He was stopped. To answer your question, normally in the past, if a loathed premier had resigned and notice came out on a Sunday function in a park, there would have been, oh, good. But this was, cheers went up. So, yes, people are much more engaged. They despise what's happened to them during COVID, the mismanagement, the deceit. They're waking up to the destruction of our energy system, waking up to the destruction of our food system. One of the legacies of Premier Palaszczuk is that she has destroyed farming communities and regional communities up and down the east coast of Queensland because of her lies on the so-called science that was showing the farming was hurting the barrier reef. Complete nonsense. We exposed that with questions in Senate committee hearing. There's no science to back it up. So people are awake to what's going on, not as awake as they need to be, but they are waking.
Well, Senator Malcolm Roberts, thank you for bringing me as a non-Queenslander up to speed with the mood there. It sounds like it is remarkably similar to the response in Victoria to when Daniel Andrews stepped down, and I can only hope that we see Queenslanders getting more and more active and more involved, and what better place to get involved than with yourself and Pauline Hanson and the One Nation Party. I think you guys do outstanding work and have done for many, many years. You've got the track record to back you up. So, Senator Malcolm Roberts, thank you so much for joining us here on the Aussie Wire, and please keep up the great work.
Thank you very much. You're welcome. And likewise, keep up the great work. We need your independent voice out there, Topher, telling the truth.
Cheers. Well, thanks to the magic of editing and the wonders of modern technology, I am all of a sudden joined in the studio by Anna McGovern. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Now, for those that missed it, Anna is our newest recruit. We're very excited to have her on board. Now, those eagle-eared listeners will have noticed there's a bit of a twang there, a bit of something in the accent. Where are you from? I'm
from London in the United Kingdom. I've moved over to Australia in September, and yeah, here I am.
And Anna's an absolute powerhouse. She's the reason why our social media content has just gone up a massive amount, both in quality and quantity. And she's going to be having a role more and more in front of camera as well. This is your first time to the studio. What do you think?
I'm loving the setup. I've, you can't see on camera, but it's actually like in an underground basement sort of thing.
There you go. That's us there.
Yeah. So I've never seen anything like this before, but I think, made good use of the space. It's really good. And we've been driving for a few hours now, just been seeing, lots of rural country roads. You never see that in London or in the UK.
All right, well, we do have some business to talk, and seeing as you are from the UK, you've only recently arrived, you've got your finger on the pulse of what's happening over there. So I've kind of got some questions and some things I want to run past you, because I'm watching and noticing what I think is a global phenomenon, but the UK seems like a weird outlier. So let me just get into it. Firstly, what we're seeing happen here in Victoria with our ex-premier, or Victoria's ex-premier, Daniel Andrews. Now, he, of course, made Melbourne the most locked down city in the world, and it really seems to me like he's paying a pretty high price. This particular story here from the Daily Mail is about a video of a driver that was driving next to him saying that it was Daniel Andrews using his phone, and actually saying, should I run him off the road?
I think for the public and everything, there's just such a lack of trust now in the state, and I think with Dan Andrews as well, especially the lockdowns that he put under, in Melbourne, and how restrictive they were for so long as well. I remember when I was working at Sky News Australia, everyone was cheering in the production desk when he resigned, because everyone's just so angry with the damage that he did to the country. And I think it shows as well the fact that we've now come through this. We've come through the COVID pandemic and all the lockdowns, and now we're just seeing a huge lack of trust and faith in those people in power making decisions that affect all of us.
Okay, I agree with you, but there's an outlier that I want to talk to you about, because it seems to me that the attitude, at least as far as the media are telling me here on the other side of the world, the attitude towards Boris Johnson almost seems to be that he didn't go far enough. Here are some protesters here. He fronted the inquiry just a few days ago. He started with an apology, and here are some protesters essentially saying, here's how many people died from COVID and all of this blood is on your hands. Is the mood different over there, or is this a twisting from the media?
I think personally that a lot of people are now incredibly angry with Boris Johnson. I think where most people agreed with the first lockdown and the reasons behind going through with it, when it came to then coming in and out of multiple lockdown restrictions, we had the second and the third one. I think for many people after that, they could just start seeing how ridiculous it was. And I think with Boris as well, we're going through the COVID inquiry currently in the UK, which is to investigate what was going on during the COVID pandemic and the decisions made by the government. And for Boris, it's almost as if like he's had an easy cop-out, because now he's about to start his own TV show as well, from an outlet that was very highly critical of him in the beginning during the COVID pandemic. And now he's been rewarded almost with his own TV show, which I just think is absolutely ridiculous, because I think we should really be holding these people to account. And I just think, again, what he did to the UK was horrific, and the way in which it affected people, I think it's irreparably damaged the trust that we have in the Conservative Party as a whole.
So I was in London for the launch of the ARC, and the Aussie Wire took a team of journalists there. It was an absolutely incredible event, and I wanted to get out and meet some Blade Runners while I was there, and I never had the opportunity. It just never quite worked out for me. But I'm very, very curious. To what degree, if any, maybe not at all, but to what degree do you think the Blade Runner phenomenon, this is where people are going and essentially vandalising ULEZ cameras. These are cameras that are designed to catch you if you enter certain parts of the city and send you a bill if you drive the wrong type of car. It's a sort of a low emissions scheme. To what degree is this Blade Runner phenomenon, do you think, contributed to or attributable to the COVID, I guess, the anger out of that? Has that fed that, or are they two entirely separate issues?
No, I think a lot of people are now deciding to take action into their own hands. I always think there'd be a group of people that are kind of inclined to do that and, take responsibility, when they see the government doing something that they don't like. Sure. Though this is just very important to, clarify, so this is under Sadiq Khan. But very much still, it is a lack of trust in the states, as we've seen. I think coming out of the pandemic of COVID lockdowns and all the restrictions that were placed with people, and then seeing many government officials just breaking them left, right and centre, while we were expected to follow the rules and comply, while we couldn't see loved ones, while we were stuck at home for months on months, and loved ones died, we couldn't go and see them either. You couldn't even attend funerals, you couldn't work, lives were completely destroyed. So I think this comes out of have a place where many people are now looking at the people in power and thinking, well, what do you do to represent me? What do you do to help or serve me? And then when you see more policies being put forward that are taking control of people's lives, so yet again, I think people are now coming to a point where they're incredibly fed up and just want to, do anything to actually, take some kind of stand against those that are putting these kind of authoritarian measures over people's lives.
Well, we're seeing changes not just in, obviously, London, and the whole Blade Runner thing is thrilling to me. I just think it's fantastic. And yes, you can quote me on that. You can sue me. I've just got off my incitement charges, so you can slap some more on me. I think it's brilliant. And we're seeing, around the world, we're seeing some things happen. But I want to take a backward step for a moment here. We've just seen Richard Branson arrive in Australia. He's launching a new cruise ship, as you do when you're a squillionaire. And he made the comment that next time, if there is a next time, and we all know there will be a next time, that we should, here in Australia, we should take the Swedish strategy. Now, what's interesting to me in the context of us talking about Boris Johnson is that was what he initially wanted to do. Initially, he was putting the brakes on the idea of lockdowns and everything else. And it was actually a model from the Imperial College of London that then completely changed everything. This model predicted absolute bedlam. It was just going to be the Black Plague if they didn't take extreme non-medical and medical interventions to try and reduce deaths. Now, in hindsight, this is an article that's been written with the benefit of hindsight, but it was actually written in 2021. It was already very obvious that model was absolutely absurd. To illustrate how absurd, when it comes to Taiwan, the Imperial College model, which actually then informed Boris Johnson's response, got the Taiwanese death toll wrong by a mere 1.8 million%. That's all, just a slight error there. And yet this is what then came to dominate the UK response. To what degree do non-politicians, the bureaucrats, the elite class, the specialist class have a lot to answer for here?
Oh, they have so much to answer for. And I think this kind of feeds into, again, the fact that the public were incredibly lied to over and over again during the COVID lockdowns. The government has now been proven we're using scare tactics to actually scare the public into compliance. With a lot of important decisions were actually being dictated over WhatsApp messages. And I just think it's awful. Like, the fact is over the fact that, they're just having, private conversations on WhatsApp and almost making light of the fact that they're trying to scare people into compliance when they know it's not actually as dangerous as they're making it out to be. So a lot of these statistics that we're now seeing were very fabricated. The public were incredibly misled. And I think, especially with this inquiry that's now going on in the UK investigating the actions of the government, I think people will now want answers and want to see what actually went on behind closed doors.
So internationally, we've seen a movement towards what I would say are minority figures who have been perhaps in politics for a while, but have never really been taken seriously. The Geert Wilders of the world, for example, the Javier Milei, although he's been in politics a bit more recently than Geert. Geert's been around for a long time. But these are people that were once dismissed, derided, written off. You're never going to amount to anything. And now all of a sudden, in a few different countries around the world, we're seeing them actually getting in as either Prime Minister or President, depending on the system. New Zealand, of course, right now has the most conservative coalition government that it's had basically in its history. Do you think that these are once again linked, that this is all an extension of this same, I guess, awakening, for lack of a better word? Oh,
absolutely. And I think they all kind of follow suited at a time. I think especially as well in terms of, the pandemic, a lot of this information was unknown, and I think a lot of these leaders were kind of following suit with each other rather than actually making decisions that were the right ones and kind of just misleading the public a lot of the time just to get them to comply with whatever crazy measure that they were then bringing forward. The public want answers, and the public want to see kind of some, sort of retribution, some, from the fact that the government misled them so badly. And I think figures like Boris Johnson have actually just got the easy end of the stick by the fact that they're now kind of being celebrated on the networks, on TV, online, despite the damage that he did to the country when he was Prime Minister.
Well, I can tell you here at the Aussie Wire, we're not that interested in letting them ride off into the sunset without facing some accountability, and you'll be hearing a lot more about that in the new year. We have a special project on that front planned. But for now, Anna McGovern, thank you so much for joining us in studio.
Thank you.
It's a rare treat. It probably won't happen very often, unfortunately, but welcome. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you again here on the Aussie Wire. Thank you for watching the Aussie Wire News. Now, we release new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. You can catch up on past episodes at theaussiewire.com and be sure to read our blogs and join our email list while you're there. And if you appreciate what we're doing here at the Aussie Wire and our commitment to truth, freedom and hope, then please make sure you become an insider via the link in the description. Thank you for watching. I'm Topher Field, and this is the Aussie Wire.